My name is Catherine Whitmore. I'm 68 years old, a retired architect, and a widow who spent half her life drawing lines that became walls, rooms, and memories. Every corner of my home once began as a pencil stroke on my drafting table. I built it from nothing but faith and long nights under a single lamp. I thought I'd built a safe place for my family. I thought love would hold it together. I was wrong. That evening, the house glowed with laughter and camera flashes. Vivian, my daughter-in-law, had planned a grand housewarming party, the kind where neighbors wander in with wine bottles and praise the hostess. I stood near the doorway, tracing the grain of the wood I had chosen myself 20 years ago. Every panel still held the warmth of my hands. She raised a glass, her voice ringing through the living room. "Welcome, everyone, to my house." A small, polite smile froze on my face. The words hung in the air like sawdust. My house. The same house I had designed, paid for, lived in. For a heartbeat, the chatter faded, replaced by a single thought pulsing behind my ribs. I wanted to speak, but my throat tightened. Before I could form a word, my son's voice cut through the noise. "Mom!" Nathan snapped. "Stop bossing her around in her home." The room fell silent. Glasses paused midair. My fingers went cold against the edge of the dining table. I hadn't said anything. Not a word. I'd only suggested earlier that the dining chairs might scratch the hardwood if they weren't lifted properly. Wood I had laid myself, plank by plank. I looked at him, at the boy I had once carried through midnight storms, the man now standing between me and the house that bore my name on every blueprint. His eyes darted away. Vivian's hand brushed his arm, gentle and triumphant. Laughter trickled back into the room, uneasy but obedient. I smiled instead of speaking. Sometimes silence slices deeper than any word. I let the quiet wrap around me, heavy but dignified. Somewhere behind the chatter, the old grandfather clock struck 7. If you've ever stood in a room you built with your own hands and felt like a stranger inside it, you'll understand what came next. Stay with me, because what happened after this moment changed everything I thought I knew about ownership, about respect, about home. I walked to the mantel, where an old wooden box sat among framed photographs. My late husband had carved it for me during our first winter together. Inside lay a bundle of receipts, yellowed and fragile, proof of every brick, beam, and nail I had paid for. Beneath them, the first blueprint I ever drew, a rough sketch of this very house. The ink had faded, but the signature was clear. K. Whitmore, architect. I slid a finger over the lines, remembering the nights I had drawn while Nathan slept in the next room. Back then, we couldn't afford contractors, so I traded design work for labor. I sketched by day and painted walls by moonlight, humming lullabies to fill the silence left by his father's passing. Every corner carried a memory. The staircase I measured twice, the kitchen island I promised would host future birthdays, the windows angled to catch morning light from my son's breakfast table. Now that same light shone on Vivian's diamond earrings. She twirled through guests, pointing out decor she hadn't chosen, acting like the artist of a masterpiece she never imagined. People clapped politely, admiring her style. She thanked them all, never once glancing my way. I watched from the archway, remembering the first foundation pour, the day the sky cracked open with rain, and I stood in boots, shielding the cement from flooding. I remembered Nathan, 12 years old, handing me an umbrella too big for his hands. "Someday," he'd said, "I'll take care of you in this house." I had believed him. Vivian's laughter snapped me back. "Oh, that old cabinet?" she said to a neighbor. I might replace it soon. It's outdated. My chest tightened. That cabinet was the last piece my husband built before his heart gave out. His initials were carved on the back. I gripped the receipt bundle harder, feeling the paper crinkle. My silence was no longer weakness. It was warning. Guests toasted, cameras flashed, and for the first time, I realized this party wasn't about celebration. It was a declaration. She wanted everyone to see me fade into the background, a retired architect without a home. Nathan avoided my eyes, sipping his drink too fast. There was something behind that glance. Guilt, maybe, or fear. I caught a flicker of unease when Vivian whispered near his ear, her smile tightening. I filed the image away like a mental note. Architects notice cracks before they widen. When the last guest left, Vivian kissed my cheek and said sweetly, "You should rest, Mom. You've done enough." Enough. That word lingered as I walked to my car under the porch light I'd wired myself. Enough designing, enough building, enough belonging. But as I turned the key, I looked back at the walls glowing behind the curtains. I wasn't old. I wasn't confused. I was done being silent. They called it her house, yet every inch carried my handwriting. Every receipt bore my name. Every memory lived under my roof. And by the time they woke up tomorrow, they would learn something I already knew. What's built on lies will never stand. After that night, sleep refused to come. I sat by my drafting table, the same oak desk that had carried every dream I ever shaped into reality. The lamp's glow spread across a stack of blueprints, curling at the edges with age. My fingers moved over them slowly, tracing the lines that once guided my hands, my hope, and my youth. Each stroke told the story of a woman who refused to give up, even when the world expected her to crumble. I was 28 when I drew the first line of this house. My husband had just passed, leaving me a son, a mortgage, and a promise I didn't know how to keep. I remember staring at an empty plot of land, the wind cold on my face, whispering doubts. People said it was impossible for a widow to build a house alone, but I knew that structure and faith shared the same foundation. You start with one solid line and build upward. Every evening, after Nathan fell asleep, I spread my tools across the kitchen table. I drafted walls, sketched beams, calculated angles. Some nights I cried quietly between pages, wiping tears before the ink smudged. But when dawn broke, determination replaced grief. I took freelance design jobs to pay for lumber. I traded sketches for labor hours with local carpenters. The sound of hammers became my lullaby. Nathan was only 8 when I took him to the lot for the first time. He held my hand, looking at the foundation beams, eyes wide. "One day, Mom," he said, "this will be our castle." I smiled, knowing castles weren't built from gold, but from grit. By the time the walls rose, my hands were rough and my back ached, but my spirit stood taller than ever. I painted each room with colors chosen for memories not yet made. The kitchen wore soft cream, the shade of his favorite pancakes. The living room gleamed honey gold, warm as his laughter. Upstairs, I designed a study with wide windows for dreams yet unspoken. Every bill I paid felt like a brick in a monument to endurance. The receipts, now faded, recorded more than numbers. They documented survival. A woman's name printed again and again, a signature of sacrifice. And on every blueprint, one line stood firm in bold ink: K. Whitmore, architect. I wasn't just designing a building, I was drafting a life. When Nathan turned 18, I gave him the framed copy of the final floor plan. "So you'll never forget where you come from," I told him. He hugged me, promising, "This will always be your house, Mom." I believed him because back then, promises meant permanence. The years unfolded like measured grids. Nathan graduated, started his own small construction firm, and married Vivian. At first, she was kind, smiles polished, compliments wrapped in silk. She often told me how much she admired the house, how lucky she felt to live somewhere so refined. I mistook admiration for gratitude. Gradually, small changes crept in. My framed sketches disappeared from the hallway. The old dining chairs I refinished vanished into storage. Vivian replaced my brass doorknobs with glossy silver ones, saying they looked more modern. I let it go. A house, I told myself, was meant to evolve. But one evening, I found the blueprint I'd signed, creased, folded, shoved into a drawer. That's when I realized evolution had turned into erasure. Still, I stayed silent. I told myself it was just furniture, just decor, just pride. Until that party. Until the word "her" echoed across the walls I had designed. Now, sitting alone at my desk, I laid out every document in neat order: purchase deed, construction permits, receipts for every beam. The story of my life written in paper trails. Proof that love and labor had built more than a structure. They had built belonging. My eyes rested on a photo tucked inside an old blueprint roll. Nathan at 10, standing beside me in a hard hat too big for his head, both of us smiling at the half-finished frame of our living room. Behind us, sunlight streamed through beams like promises of tomorrow. I whispered to the picture, "We built this together, son. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The house wasn't just wood and nails. It was the sum of all my sacrifices. Nights spent drafting by candlelight, mornings meeting contractors before sunrise, afternoons balancing invoices at the kitchen counter. Every corner whispered a chapter of endurance. People often say a home is where the heart is. But for me, it was also where my fingerprints rested on every wall, where each line measured not distance, but devotion. I leaned back, letting the weight of memory settle. I thought about the young widow I once was, the woman who borrowed courage from exhaustion and hope from empty pockets. She had built something real, something that couldn't be taken by signatures forged or words spoken in arrogance. In the quiet of that night, I rolled up the blueprints and tied them with a crimson ribbon. They weren't relics, they were reminders. The house wasn't just shelter, it was testament. And I wasn't just an old architect. I was the author of every square inch. They could call it whatever they wanted, but truth had a foundation deeper than pride. I placed the ribboned scroll beside the box of receipts and whispered to myself, steady and certain, "This story isn't over. Not yet." The next evening, Nathan called and asked if I would join them for dinner. His voice carried a rehearsed warmth, the kind people use when they're trying too hard to sound casual. "Vivian's making your favorite roast," he said. I paused, sensing something beneath the invitation. But I agreed. A mother learns to read the spaces between her son's words. I arrived with a basket of sourdough bread, still warm from the oven. Cooking always calmed me, and after last night's humiliation, I needed the comfort of something steady, something I made with my own hands. The house glowed softly through the windows, golden light spilling across the lawn. It was still beautiful, still mine, in ways they could never touch. Vivian opened the door before I could knock. Her smile was painted perfectly, a hostess ready for a performance. "Come in, Mom," she sang, kissing the air near my cheek. The smell of rosemary filled the hallway. Everything looked staged. Fresh flowers on the table, candles lit though it wasn't dark yet, placemats folded into perfect squares. Nathan greeted me in the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He looked tired, the kind of tired that hides behind politeness. "Smells great," I said. He nodded, eyes avoiding mine. Something was wrong. We sat down together, just the three of us. Vivian ladled stew into bowls, her bracelets jingling. "We've been meaning to talk about a few things," she began, her tone gentle, practiced. I glanced at Nathan, who stirred his spoon in silence. Vivian reached into a folder beside her and pulled out a stack of papers. "It's nothing serious, just routine," she said with a light laugh. "Some refinancing documents. You know how these things pile up. We just need an updated signature from you since your name's still on the deed." I set my spoon down. The word deed echoed. "Refinancing?" I asked. "For what purpose?" "Oh, just some small updates," she said quickly. "It'll help us lower interest rates and maybe free some funds for renovations. You wouldn't want your son to carry unnecessary financial weight, would you?" I turned to Nathan. "Is this true?" He hesitated. His jaw tightened. "It's just paperwork, Mom. It'll make things easier." "Easier for whom?" I asked quietly. Vivian's eyes softened in that syrupy way she used when trying to look innocent. "We're a family, Catherine. Everything we do is together. You trust us, don't you?" Trust. That word again, stretched thin like old wallpaper. I reached for the papers, scanning the text. The language was vague, but deliberate. Clauses about ownership adjustment, title amendments, and authorization of representation. The kind of language that dances around truth. I'd spent decades reading architectural contracts. I knew how traps were hidden in fine print. "This isn't refinancing," I said softly. "This is a transfer." Vivian's smile flickered. "Oh, you're overthinking it. Lawyers just use complex words." I leaned back, studying her face. "Then you won't mind if I take these to my attorney for review?" The air stiffened. Nathan looked down, his spoon motionless. Vivian laughed again, but the sound cracked. "Oh, come on, Mom. There's no need for lawyers between family. It's just a formality. You sign, we notarize, done." My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anger disguised as calm. "A formality that removes my name from the house?" Nathan shifted. "It's just easier if it's in our names now," he muttered. I stared at him. "Easier? You mean easier for you or easier for her?" He flinched. Vivian reached for his hand, squeezing it as if guiding a puppet. "You've done so much for us," she cooed. "Let us take care of things now." "I already did," I said quietly. "I took care of everything before you even met." Silence. The only sound was the faint tick of the kitchen clock, marking the seconds between what was said and what was lost. I pushed the papers back toward her. "No." Vivian blinked. "Excuse me?" I said, "No. I don't sign what I don't understand, and I don't transfer what I built." Her eyes sharpened, the sweetness peeling away. "I thought you trusted us." "I trust paper trails," I replied. "And this one leads somewhere you don't want me to see." Nathan rubbed his temples. "Mom, please. I'm under a lot of stress. The business." I looked at him sharply. "What about the business?" He froze. Vivian's smile returned, thin and warning. "It's nothing," she said. "Just some delays in payments." But I saw it then, the weight in Nathan's shoulders, the guilt pressing behind his silence. He was drowning, and she was handing him an anchor disguised as help. I folded the documents neatly and slid them back into her folder. "Thank you for dinner. The roast was good." I stood, smoothing the hem of my cardigan. "But next time, don't invite me to a meal when the main course is betrayal." Vivian rose quickly. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, turning to her. "I'm being observant. An architect always studies the cracks before the collapse." I placed my basket of bread on the counter. "Consider it a gift, something made with honesty. It's worth more than signatures on deceit." Her jaw tightened. Nathan looked torn, eyes pleading for peace he couldn't buy. I walked to the door, my heels steady on the hardwood I had chosen, laid, and paid for. Before leaving, I looked back once. "This house may have your furniture, Vivian, but the foundation remembers my name." Outside, the air felt cooler, cleaner. The night sky stretched wide, and for the first time in years, I felt the ground firm beneath me. I didn't know every scheme they were hiding, not yet. But I knew one thing with certainty. I had drawn these walls, and now I would draw the line. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, glinting off the dust motes that hung in the air. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the steam curl like thought itself. My reflection in the mug looked older, sharper, more awake. The papers from last night replayed in my mind, each vague clause, each calculated smile. My instincts hummed like a wire pulled too tight. Something inside those documents was meant to erase me. I finished my coffee and climbed the stairs toward the attic. It had always been my sanctuary, a space filled with memories of blueprints, measuring tools, and sketches taped to the slanted walls. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The smell of old paper greeted me, mixed with cedar and thyme. Morning light streamed through the small window, cutting across stacks of drawings. Dust shimmered like whispers waiting to be heard. My drafting table stood in the center, worn smooth by decades of ideas. I sat down, running my hand across the surface, and opened the drawer that once held my important files. Inside were envelopes labeled by year, rolled plans tied with twine, and folders with my initials. I began sorting through them one by one. Near the bottom of the pile, I found a folder marked Deed Original. I laid it flat and opened it carefully. Inside was a photocopy, not the original parchment I remembered signing years ago. My heart slowed. The signature at the bottom caught my eye. My name, written with my familiar flourish, but something about it was wrong. The loop of the W was slightly tilted, the ink too dark, the pressure uneven. I'd signed enough contracts in my life to know my own hand. This wasn't it. I reached for my magnifier, a habit from my design days, and leaned closer. The strokes trembled where mine would have been confident. Someone had traced me. I exhaled slowly, feeling both vindicated and violated. They hadn't just tried to take the house. They had tried to imitate the very mark of my existence. I turned the page over and found a faint stamp, one I didn't recognize. The name of a notary I had never met. My chest tightened. The so-called refinancing papers from dinner must have been part of a larger plan. This copy was their blueprint, forged and prepped. I pulled out my phone and began photographing every page. Proof. That word mattered. Without proof, truth drowns. As I flipped through more papers, a smaller sheet slipped out. A printed email. The header caught my eye. From Vivian H. Whitmore, Harper Consults. Com to Troy, MillerBuildMarkCo.com subject. Finalize deed and escrow, ASAP. My pulse quickened. I adjusted my glasses and read on. Make sure the revised deed reflects transfer of ownership to us before we file. Catherine's review period expires this week. Nathan won't question it once the accounts settle. Let me know when the signatures are processed. I froze. Us. The word bled betrayal. So it was true. Vivian had been working with Troy, Nathan's business partner. I'd met him once at a holiday dinner, all slick smiles and easy charm. I hadn't liked how his eyes lingered on numbers more than people. The pieces began aligning like a cruel puzzle. Nathan's silence, the mounting debt, the rushed paperwork, the party meant to declare possession. It was all part of a performance leading to a transfer, and I had nearly been cast as the unwitting extra. I leaned back, letting the weight of revelation settle. Betrayal didn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it whispered through emails and signatures. I looked around the attic, at the sketches pinned to the walls. My house, the one they called hers, had been born here. I remembered nights drawing by lamplight while Nathan slept downstairs, promising myself this place would keep him safe. Now he was a grown man, tangled in deceit, and I was left defending the very home built to protect him. My eyes landed on an old photograph pinned above the desk. Nathan as a child, standing beside the foundation beams, smiling up at me with pride. That memory burned against the image of the man at dinner, silent while his wife pushed forged documents across the table. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. Anger had a heat to it, but mine cooled into clarity. Emotion wouldn't fix this. Precision would. I gathered the photocopy, the email, and the stamped notary mark into a folder labeled Evidence. My fingers didn't tremble. They measured, planned. This was no longer about sentiment. It was architecture, justice built line by line. Before leaving the attic, I opened a small wooden chest near the window. Inside rested my old drafting compass, the tool that had shaped every angle of this house. I held it gently, the metal cool against my skin. It reminded me of my younger self, methodical, patient, exacting. She was still here. I locked the attic door behind me and carried the folder downstairs. On the table, next to my half-empty coffee cup, I placed it like a cornerstone. Every structure begins with a foundation, and these papers, would be mine. Vivian might believe her charm could outshine the truth. Troy might think his numbers could bury evidence. But they underestimated the woman who designed the walls around them. By evening, I would make a call. Someone I trusted, someone who knew how to navigate hidden corridors of law the way I once mapped beams and staircases. I would not raise my voice. I would not beg for fairness. I would simply draw my next plan. And this time, every line would lead them exactly where they belonged. I didn't call Nathan that day. Some truths needed silence before sound. Instead, I spent the morning at my kitchen table, sorting the papers I'd gathered from the attic. The folder lay open beside my coffee cup, filled with the forged deed, the email between Vivian and Troy, and every receipt I had ever kept. Proof sat before me like bricks waiting to be laid. When grief mixes with betrayal, it doesn't shout, it steadies. I'd built my life one measured line at a time, and I would rebuild this battle the same way. Anger might crumble under pressure, but strategy could bear any weight. By noon, I dialed Charles Bender. He was my late husband's closest friend, now a retired attorney who still kept his instincts sharp. "Charles," I said when he picked up, "I think someone's trying to rewrite my history." His voice softened. Tell me everything. I explained about the dinner, the papers, the photocopy, the email. He didn't interrupt. Lawyers, like architects, know that foundations form from listening first. When I finished, the line hummed with thought. "You were right not to sign," he said finally. "That document wasn't refinancing. It's a deed transfer masked as consolidation, classic fraud. If they're already drafting behind your back, they've built more than one path to the same goal." "Then I'll need to close every one of them," I replied. "You will," he assured, "but not by confrontation, by control. You want your house safe? You sell it." I frowned. "Sell it?" "Yes, before they file anything binding. Put it under a new entity, something you own privately. That way, even if they attempt a forged claim, there'll be no property left to steal." The idea sounded radical and brilliant all at once. I'd spent years drawing plans for structures. Now I would design one for survival. "Do you have someone who can handle a discreet transaction?" he asked. "I think I do," I said, already picturing Evelyn Ward. After hanging up, I crossed the street to her porch. Evelyn was watering geraniums, her sun hat tilted low. "You've got that look," she teased, "the one you had when you redesigned your kitchen in a single weekend." "Maybe something bigger this time," I said. We sat together on her porch swing, the afternoon breeze fluttering between us. I told her what had happened, the dinner, the papers, the forgery. Her eyes narrowed, not with pity, but with resolve. "People forget old women read the fine print," she said. "You want to sell it under the radar, right?" "Yes," quickly, quietly. She tapped her chin, calculating. "I know a shell firm we can use as a front buyer, Aurora Estates LLC. We'll list through my old channels, set escrow with a trusted officer, and keep the closing tight. One day, 2 at most." "Would that protect me?" "It will do more than that," she said. "You'll become your own buyer. You'll move your home into safer hands, your own." I felt the corners of my lips lift for the first time in days. "Then let's draw the blueprint." We spent the afternoon at my dining table, papers spread across the wood I once sanded myself. Evelyn filled in forms while I reviewed every line. Charles joined by phone, confirming each clause with the precision of a craftsman. The plan took shape. Create Whitmore Holdings, LLC, a private trust fully controlled by me. Aurora Estates, LLC, a subsidiary, would appear as the purchasing company. To outsiders, it would look like a standard sale. In truth, the deed would travel in a circle, out of reach, then back to my hands. By evening, the first documents were ready for signatures. Evelyn looked up from her notes. "Once escrow opens, the clock starts. We'll close tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I repeated, feeling the weight lift slightly. She smiled. "Sometimes you don't fight a storm head-on. You let it pass while you build a stronger roof." I walked her to the door, gratitude swelling quietly in my chest. After she left, I sat alone in the fading light. The house around me was still. Shadows stretched across the floorboards, touching each corner like memories reaching out. I opened the folder again, smoothing the email from Vivian and Troy. Their words no longer stung. They instructed. They'd shown me their blueprint. Now I was revising the design. I took a deep breath, letting calm settle where chaos once lived. I had always believed in structure, the way each beam supports the next, the way weight distributes when planned with care. Life, I realized, was no different. You can't remove betrayal from its foundation, but you can redirect the load before it collapses. On the counter sat a small ceramic bowl filled with keys: house keys, gate keys, mailbox keys. I took one and turned it over in my palm. It was smooth from decades of use, warm from my skin. I placed it back, closing the lid gently. Some things you don't lose. You reclaim them. The night settled softly outside. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea, carrying it to my favorite chair near the window. The air smelled faintly of cedar and courage. Tomorrow would bring papers, signatures, and the quiet sound of victory disguised as business. I thought of Nathan, my boy who once helped me paint these walls, now tangled in debts and silence. He didn't know what Vivian was plotting. Or maybe he did, but didn't know how to stop it. Either way, I would handle this alone. Not out of pride, but love. A mother's protection isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's architectural, unseen but unbreakable. I looked around the room one last time before turning off the light. The beams above me had held storms before. They would hold again. I whispered into the quiet, "You were built to stand, and so was I." Tomorrow I would sign the papers. And when the ink dried, they would think they'd outplayed me. They'd call the house theirs. They wouldn't realize they were stepping into walls I'd drawn long before they learned how to lie. Morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of morning that carried purpose. I woke before the sun, brewed coffee, and spread the new documents across my kitchen table. The forms glimmered with quiet promise. What had started as betrayal was turning into blueprints for deliverance. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. At 8 sharp, Evelyn arrived carrying a leather folder and a calm that only seasoned negotiators possess. "We've got everything lined up," she said, placing the folder beside my mug. Aurora Estates LLC is officially registered. Whitmore Holdings owns it outright. You're both seller and buyer, 2 sides of the same coin. I nodded, still marveling at the ingenuity of it. "How long do we have?" "1 day. Escrow's ready to open. The listing will go private. No public eyes, no gossip. We'll schedule closing for tomorrow. By then, the deed will already have traveled out of their reach." I looked around the room at the beams and corners that had once sheltered laughter. Every inch still felt alive with memory. "Let's do it," I said. Evelyn smiled, tapping her pen. Then we moved fast. We drove together to the escrow office downtown. The building smelled faintly of lemon polish and old carpet. Ordinary, unremarkable, exactly what we needed. The clerk greeted us politely, sliding forms across the counter. Evelyn handled most of the conversation, her voice smooth and efficient. I signed where she pointed, initials flowing across each page. As I wrote my name, I felt no sadness. Ownership wasn't about holding. It was about understanding what could never be taken. This house wasn't slipping away. It was stepping into safer hands, mine. When the last page was done, the clerk stamped the documents with a satisfying thud. "Escrow opened. We'll process immediately," she said. Outside, sunlight gleamed off the glass doors. Evelyn slipped her sunglasses on, grinning. "You just sold your house." I laughed softly and bought it back. Back home, the air felt different, lighter. The foundation seemed to hum beneath my feet, as if approving the plan. I placed the signed packet inside a drawer, locking it carefully. The key felt heavy, but in the best way, a weight that meant control. I spent the afternoon tidying rooms that had been rearranged too many times by someone else's taste. I set the furniture back to its rightful places. The old cabinet my husband built returned to its corner. Dust clung to its carvings. catching the light like silver threads. I ran my fingers along the initials on its back, his mark, still proud. Vivian texted around 3. "Dinner again tonight? We can go over those papers." I've adjusted a few details. I stared at the screen, then typed a single reply. "No need. Everything's already in order." She didn't respond. Evelyn called later to confirm the closing. "Funds are in motion. You'll sign the final deed tomorrow morning. After that, the record updates instantly. Aurora Estates will appear as owner. They'll never know who's behind it." "Perfect," I said. "Let's keep it that way." Evening descended gently, painting the windows in amber tones. I stood at the kitchen sink, watching the horizon blur. Somewhere across town, Vivian was likely plotting her next move, still believing she was 3 steps ahead. She'd see soon enough that architects never lose track of structure. I pulled out my old drafting compass from the attic drawer and laid it on the counter. Its metal arms gleamed under the warm light. This tool had drawn the first circles of my home. Now it reminded me of another truth. Every circle closes eventually. Dinner was quiet. I ate alone, savoring the calm before revelation. My hands no longer shook. They measured, planned. The more I thought about it, the more poetic it seemed, defending a house through the same craft that built it. Lines, signatures, layers of design. Justice disguised as paperwork. Before bed, I walked through each room, touching the walls gently, like saying goodnight to old friends. The living room still smelled faintly of pine, the study of books and ink. Upstairs, the light in Nathan's old bedroom flickered slightly, reflecting against a poster he'd hung decades ago, a blueprint of a bridge we once admired together. "Strong foundations," he'd said then. I hoped he remembered. In the hallway, I paused before the framed photograph of our first day on the property. Me in worn jeans, Nathan in muddy sneakers, both smiling despite exhaustion. Behind us, nothing but open land. I touched the frame and whispered, "We'll reclaim every inch, my boy. You just don't know it yet." As the clock neared midnight, I sat once more at my drafting table. Instead of blueprints, I laid out tomorrow's checklist: ID, trust documents, escrow receipt. Step by step, just as I'd done when raising beams or measuring walls. Outside, wind rustled through the maple leaves. They shimmered in the porch light, steady and sure. Growth, I thought, always begins with a single seed. Small, unseen, but destined to break through. Tonight, I had planted mine. By this time tomorrow, the deed would bear a new name. Vivian would still be calling it her house, unaware she was living inside a plan far older and wiser than her schemes. I turned off the lamp and stood in the dark, letting the quiet settle. Justice didn't need noise. It just needed design. The next morning, I woke with purpose. The air felt sharp, clean, almost ceremonial. Today, the final signature would lock the circle. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy blouse and silver earrings my husband had given me on our 20th anniversary. They always reminded me who I was, a woman who built things meant to last. At 9, Evelyn called. "Everything's set. The notary's ready, documents prepped. All we need is your hand." "My hand's steady," I said. By 10, we were seated in her small home office, sunlight spilling across the polished oak desk. The deed rested in front of me, thick with official seals. I studied it line by line, every word precise. Whitmore Holdings, LLC as grantor, Aurora Estates, LLC as grantee. It was elegant in its simplicity, protection through ownership by reflection. Evelyn pointed at the last page. "Sign here, Catherine. This is the moment you step into both roles, seller and buyer." I took the pen and wrote my name slowly, every letter deliberate. No tremor, no doubt. When I finished, the notary pressed her stamp into the paper, sealing it with a firm click. Evelyn smiled. Congratulations. You've just sold your house to yourself. I exhaled, tension leaving me in a long, quiet breath. Feels like I've just built another one. You did, she said. A legal fortress. I thanked her and tucked the documents carefully into my folder. Outside, sunlight cut through the trees, bright and unblinking. For the first time in weeks, I felt untouchable. I drove straight home, my hands calm on the wheel. The neighborhood looked peaceful, unaware of the storm brewing behind one household's pristine facade. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Vivian's car already parked. She stepped out, smile bright, folder in hand. "Mom, perfect timing," she called. "I have those insurance forms we talked about. Just routine updates. Insurance forms." The words almost made me laugh. I carried my own folder, holding papers that carried far more power. "All right," I said evenly. "Let's review them." We moved into the kitchen, sunlight filtering through the curtains. She laid her documents on the table, all neatly arranged, highlighted in yellow. I sat across from her, setting my folder beside the vase of lilies. "Here," she said sweetly, sliding the top page toward me. "It just confirms we're co-insured. Nothing major. Nathan thought we should handle this together." I skimmed the first paragraph. Vague terms again, hidden clauses about joint occupancy, shared authority, ownership verification. I'd seen this trick before. "Of course," I murmured. "I'll be happy to sign the correct copy." Vivian smiled wider, mistaking my calm for surrender. "Perfect. I had them printed in duplicate." "Even better." I reached into my folder and swapped the top page with the one Charles had prepared last night. A mirrored template disguised as hers, but leading back to my recent sale. It confirmed coverage under Aurora Estates LLC, effective immediately. No shared authority, no transfer, no loopholes. She handed me her pen. "Right here," I signed smoothly. She leaned over, eager to witness victory. "Thank you," she said. "This means so much to us." "To all of us," I replied, sliding the signed page back into her folder. "You might want to file it promptly. Paperwork deserves respect." "I will," she said, gathering the documents quickly before I could change my mind. She slipped them into her briefcase, snapping it shut with satisfaction. I watched her go, heels clicking across the floor I had laid. The front door closed behind her, and the house fell silent. Only then did I let a quiet smile cross my face. She thought she'd gained authority. Instead, she just notarized her own irrelevance. I placed my pen on the counter and poured a cup of tea. The steam curled like contentment. The paper she carried would confirm what I'd already done. The sale, the transfer, the shift of power. She'd move forward confident, even celebratory. And within hours, she'd realized the structure she believed she'd built had no foundation. Later that afternoon, I drove back to Evelyn's. She met me at the door, holding her phone. "Recordings filed," she said. "County Registrar updated at 2:15. Aurora Estates LLC is now the official owner. So, it's done." "It's done," she affirmed. "They can't touch a single shingle." I looked out her window at the skyline. Clouds drifted lazily, unaware of the battles fought beneath them. "Funny," I said softly. "For years, I designed homes for others. Now I've just designed my own defense." Evelyn chuckled. "You've built a masterpiece of justice." That evening, I Returned to my quiet kitchen. The folder sat on the table, neat and sealed. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, but tonight I let peace settle like dusk across the walls. They wanted me erased. Instead, they'd signed their names beside mine, thinking they'd written me out. They'd discover soon enough that every line leads back to the one who drew it first. The next morning arrived soft and steady, like a held breath. I dressed simply. White blouse, gray slacks, hair pulled back, nothing to draw attention. Justice didn't need spectacle. It needed precision. Today, the transaction would close. Every piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Evelyn picked me up just after 8. She carried a canvas tote filled with final documents, her expression bright with quiet triumph. "Ready for closing day?" she asked. "As ready as the woman who built every wall," I said. The drive downtown felt lighter than it should have. My hands rested on my lap, calm and still. Outside, the city pulsed with weekday rhythm, people rushing, horns blaring, footsteps clicking. Yet inside the car, time moved differently. Every block we passed carried me closer to safety, closer to reclaiming what was mine. The escrow office sat at the corner of a quiet street, small enough to avoid notice. Inside, a clerk greeted us with polite efficiency, guiding us to a conference room lined with certificates. A pot of coffee steamed on a side table. Evelyn spread the papers before me, neat and exact. "This is the deed," she said softly, tapping the page. "Once you sign here and here, Aurora Estates LLC will officially own the property. Funds will release to Whitmore Holdings immediately, and you, Catherine, will hold both." I read each line carefully. Every clause reflected Charles's careful touch. Language airtight, ownership clear, no room for dispute. The pen felt steady in my hand as I wrote my name. The notary nodded, pressing her seal with a sharp click. "Congratulations," Evelyn whispered. "You just completed the cleanest sale I've ever witnessed." I smiled. "It's more than a sale. It's a restoration." The clerk gathered the pages, stamping each with a rhythmic precision. "Deed recorded," she said, sliding one copy toward me. "Transfer complete." That was it. Years of labor, months of tension, and days of planning, all sealed within a single page. I folded the deed carefully and placed it into my leather folder. Ownership had never left my hands. It had simply traveled through the labyrinth I designed for it. Outside, the sun caught the glass windows, scattering light across the pavement. Evelyn exhaled, long and satisfied. They won't even know until the notice posts. "Let's make sure they see it," I said quietly. We stopped at her realty office, a small brick building nestled between a cafe and a florist. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and ink. She drafted the notice on letterhead. "Notice of new ownership. Aurora Estates, LLC." The document listed the property's address, the date of transfer, and the effective change of title. Evelyn read it aloud once, ensuring every word struck the right tone: formal, irrefutable, final. "I'll post it this afternoon," she said, "and I'll send a copy by certified mail. By sunset, it'll be public record." "Perfect," I replied. Truth should arrive on time. Back home, I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, letting the quiet settle around me. The house stood just as it always had, stoic, graceful, unaware of the papers that now shielded it. Vivian's car wasn't there. The silence felt almost tender. I walked through each room slowly, taking in the details. The sunlight filtering through lace curtains, the faint scent of pine polish on the staircase railing, the hum of life woven into every beam. My hands brushed the walls as I passed, the same walls I'd measured decades ago. They no longer felt heavy with threat. They felt like armor. In the living room, I paused before the fireplace. On the mantel sat the wooden box of receipts, the small testament to every dollar spent, every hour labored. I opened it gently, placing the new deed inside, folding the receipts around it like a cradle. The clock struck noon, its chime echoing softly. I poured a cup of tea and carried it to the window seat overlooking the garden. Outside, the maple tree shifted gently in the breeze. I watched the leaves dance, their shadows painting the grass below. There was beauty in stillness and strength. My phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. Notice posted. Mail confirmed. You're officially protected. I smiled, typing back, "Thank you for helping me build my final blueprint." Resting the phone beside me, I sipped my tea and let the warmth spread. Somewhere across town, Vivian might be drafting another plan, convinced she'd soon take control. She'd discover soon enough that every path she paved led straight back to me. By evening, the sky blushed pink and gold. I stood on the porch, watching the colors fade across the horizon. For the first time in months, the weight behind my ribs eased. My home wasn't just standing. It was secure, wrapped in layers of design no scheme could breach. When the porch light flickered on, I whispered softly, "You're safe now." The words weren't just for the house. They were for me. I closed the front door and locked it, the latch clicking firm. Upstairs, in my study, the folder rested on the desk beside my drafting compass. I touched the cool metal, smiling. "Blueprints," I murmured. "They're not just drawings. They're promises kept." Outside, crickets began their quiet chorus. The house creaked gently, settling into the night. I turned off the lamp and stood by the window, watching the stars blink awake. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered through the rustle of leaves and the steady beat of a heart at peace. Tomorrow would bring reaction, panic, confusion, denial. But none of it would shake the foundation. This chapter was sealed, the deed recorded, the house sold, and the owner, at last, was me again. The morning after the closing felt strangely ordinary. The kettle whistled, birds chattered in the maple tree, and sunlight spilled through the kitchen window like honey. But beneath the calm, something powerful pulsed. Quiet justice, ready to rise. I placed my teacup on the counter and glanced at the clock. 9:15. Evelyn would be here soon with the notice. She had insisted on delivering it herself. Said a moment this significant deserved witnesses. I agreed. After all, every good design needed someone to see the finished structure. At 9:30 sharp, a firm knock echoed through the hallway. I opened the door to find Evelyn standing tall, folder in hand, her eyes bright with satisfaction. "Ready?" she asked. "As ready as a woman who's reclaimed her foundation," I said. She stepped inside, setting the envelope on the foyer table. The paper gleamed in the morning light. Official, sealed, irrefutable. Across the top, in bold letters, "Notice of new ownership, Aurora Estates, LLC." "You should probably be here when they see it," Evelyn said, her smile thin and knowing. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied. Together, we walked down the driveway. The air was crisp, the kind that wakes the senses. Evelyn knelt and taped the notice to the front gate, pressing it firmly against the iron bar. The sound was final, paper meeting truth. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Vivian's car pulled into the drive, tires crunching over gravel. She stepped out in a tailored blazer, phone in hand, eyes sharp with confidence. Nathan followed, slower, looking tired and uneasy. "Morning," Vivian called brightly, though her tone carried an edge. "What's this?" She strode forward, scanning the paper, her brow furrowed. "Notice of new ownership? What on earth?" Her voice cut off. Her eyes darted to me. "Aurora Estates LLC? Who sold the house?" I met her gaze calmly. "I did." Her lips parted, confusion flickering into alarm. You can't just sell it. This is our home." I tilted my head slightly. "Is it? The deed was still in my name. Or did you forget?" Nathan stepped closer, reading the notice, his eyes widening as understanding dawned. "Mom, you sold it?" "Yes," I said. "Yesterday. It closed this morning." Vivian laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "That's ridiculous. You'd need a buyer, a bank, Her voice faltered. "Aurora Estates. Who is that?" Evelyn folded her arms, standing beside me like a sentinel. "A registered company. Fully legitimate." Vivian's face drained of color. "This isn't possible. You can't just—" "Oh, but I can," I said softly. "When you design something, you know every exit, every hidden door. You should have studied the blueprint before trying to change the walls." Her hand trembled as she pointed at me. "You tricked us." "No," I replied. "I protected myself." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "Viv, did you know about this? Did you—" He stopped, realization dawning, guilt shadowing his face. Vivian turned on him, voice rising. "Don't look at me like that. I told you she'd be stubborn. We just needed her signature." "Signature?" I asked, lifting an eyebrow. "Do you mean the one you forged?" She froze. Nathan's head snapped toward her. "What?" Evelyn took a step forward. "We found the photocopy in the attic, along with an email from you and Troy Miller. You should choose your words carefully, Mrs. Whitmore." Vivian's breath hitched. "That's absurd. You can't prove—" "I can," I said quietly, "and I will." The silence that followed was heavy, stretching across the yard like shadow. A single leaf drifted down from the maple tree, landing near Vivian's heel. She didn't move. An hour passed, though it felt longer. Neighbors began to glance over fences, drawn by the rising tension. The HOA president, Mrs. Larkin, strolled by with her terrier, slowing as she noticed the notice on the gate. "Oh my," she murmured. "New ownership already?" Vivian forced a brittle smile. "Just a mix-up." "Not at all," I said gently. "The property changed hands yesterday." Mrs. Larkin blinked. "Well, congratulations, Catherine. Aurora Estates must have good taste. They kept your lovely design just as it was." I smiled faintly. "Yes, they did." Vivian's face flushed crimson. "You planned this." "I planned to survive," I said, and I did. At 10:30, Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. "Confirmation email from the county. Transfers live. You're officially recorded as previous owner, Catherine. Aurora Estates is listed as current." Vivian's voice cracked. "You sold it out from under us." "No," I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice. "I sold it before you could steal it." Nathan's shoulders sagged. "Viv, is it true? The emails, the signatures?" She didn't answer. Her silence screamed louder than any denial. Evelyn folded the spare copy of the notice and handed it to me. "You should keep this, for the record." I slipped it into my folder, the paper warm from sunlight. "Thank you," I said. Vivian stood motionless, lips pressed thin, fury flickering behind her eyes. But anger couldn't build anything. It could only break. Nathan turned to me, voice low. "Mom, I'm sorry." I looked at him, really looked at him. The boy who once promised to protect our home, now trapped in the wreckage of someone else's ambition. "You'll have a chance to make things right," I said softly. "But not today." Vivian's phone buzzed again. She didn't answer. Her hands shook as she stuffed it into her bag, muttering something about calling a lawyer. Evelyn stepped beside me, her gaze steady. "Ready to go inside?" "Yes," I said, turning toward the house. "It's time to breathe in a home that's mine again." Behind us, the notice fluttered lightly in the breeze. A white flag and a warning all at once. 2 days later, the neighborhood gathered again. This time, the invitation came from Vivian. She called it an open house for the HOA committee, a way to celebrate community. The phrasing made me smile. She was trying to reclaim power through performance, the same way she'd once seized control through charm. But no amount of decoration could cover cracks in the foundation. Evelyn stopped by early to help me prepare. We didn't exchange many words. We didn't need to. She'd arranged for the HOA to receive copies of the ownership transfer that morning. Every homeowner on the street now knew Aurora Estates LLC held the deed. Vivian, however, still believed the title was hers. At 3, guests began to arrive, neighbors carrying casseroles, fruit platters, bottles of wine. The living room filled with chatter and polite laughter. I moved through the crowd with quiet grace, nodding to familiar faces, watching Vivian flutter from group to group like a restless bird. She had dressed carefully, emerald dress, pearls gleaming, smile painted bright. "Welcome, everyone," she called. "So glad you could come to my home. We've done a few updates. Please, make yourselves comfortable." The words landed like pebbles in a pond. Small ripples, then silence. Evelyn caught my eye across the room, hiding a smirk behind her glass. I stood near the mantel, hands folded, observing. Vivian led a small tour, gesturing to curtains she hadn't chosen, fixtures she hadn't installed, floors she hadn't paid for. "I just love this open layout," she said. "It's so timeless." One of the HOA board members, Mr. Green, glanced toward me. "Didn't you design this place, Catherine?" "I did," I said softly. "Every wall, every beam." Vivian laughed, the sound brittle. "Of course she helped in the beginning, but I've made it our own." I met her gaze, calm and steady. "You've certainly tried." The air shifted. Conversations dulled, curiosity flickered. Neighbors looked from her to me, uncertain which story to believe. It wasn't my goal to humiliate, but truth has a way of revealing itself, even without permission. Just then, Evelyn stepped forward, her voice bright with false casualness. "Oh, Vivian, it's so generous of you to host everyone. I'm sure the new owner appreciates how well you've maintained the property." Vivian blinked. "The what?" "The new owner," Evelyn repeated pleasantly. "Aurora Estates LLC. They must be thrilled to have such devoted tenants." A hush fell over the room. Someone coughed. Glass clinked against a plate. Vivian's smile faltered. I think there's some confusion. This is our house." Evelyn tilted her head. "Oh, I'm sorry. The county records show otherwise. The transfer was processed last week. Didn't you see the notice?" Vivian's eyes darted toward me, searching for denial. I offered none. "She's right," I said. "Ownership changed days ago." Laughter rippled awkwardly among the guests, uncertain and restrained. The HOA president, Mrs. Larkin, adjusted her pearls. "My, what a surprise. Catherine, you never mentioned selling." "It was a quiet transaction," I said evenly. "Sometimes a woman has to redraw her boundaries." Vivian's voice rose, sharp and trembling. This is absurd. There must be a mistake. Then you'll need to take it up with the registrar's office, Evelyn said, sipping her punch. They're quite efficient. I filed the paperwork myself. Vivian's face flushed crimson. You can't do this in front of everyone. I haven't done anything, I replied. You did. When you claimed credit for walls you never built. When you called my home yours. A murmur swept through the room. Neighbors exchanged looks, whispering softly. Nathan stood near the hallway, pale and silent, eyes fixed on the floor. Vivian's voice cracked. Nathan, say something. He looked up slowly, meeting my gaze, then hers. I think maybe it's time we listen. Her breath hitched. You can't be serious. He swallowed hard. I should have stopped this. I knew about the debt, about Troy. I just didn't know how deep it went. Mom tried to warn me. I didn't listen. The room seemed to hold its breath. Vivian's eyes blazed, betrayal mirrored in fury. You're taking her side? She's not choosing sides, I said gently. He's facing the truth. She spun toward the guests, desperate for an ally. She manipulated us. You all saw how she's been. Controlling, judgmental, designing. I corrected softly. There's a difference. Evelyn stepped closer. Vivian, I suggest you calm down. The HOA values honesty. You might want to focus on finding a new address rather than rewriting the past. The words hit like a gavel. Vivian froze, then turned and fled down the hall. The bedroom door slammed, rattling the picture frames. The crowd shifted uneasily. Mrs. Larkin cleared her throat. Well, Catherine, it seems congratulations are in order. You've reclaimed a lovely home. Not reclaimed, I said. Restored. One by one, the neighbors began to drift toward the door, murmuring polite goodbyes, some offering sympathetic smiles, others simply nodding in respect. When the last guest left, the house fell into a hush, broken only by the ticking clock on the wall. Nathan lingered by the doorway. Mom, he said quietly, I'm sorry. I let her twist everything. You let yourself forget what's true, I said. But truth waits. It always does. He nodded, eyes glassy. Can I stay tonight? Of course, I said. You helped build these walls once. They'll always have room for you. Later, after he'd gone to bed, I stood in the empty living room. The lights glowed softly against the polished floors. The air felt lighter, freer. The walls seemed to exhale, as though relieved to remember their true name. Through the window, I saw Evelyn on her porch, raising her glass toward me in silent salute. I smiled back. Justice, I thought, doesn't need thunder. Sometimes it simply stands still while lies collapse around it. The morning after the open house was quiet, heavy with the weight of everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. The house seemed to breathe again, its silence no longer sharp but reflective, like the pause after a long storm. I brewed coffee, the familiar aroma curling through the kitchen, and set 2 cups on the table, one for me, one for Nathan. He came downstairs slowly, shoulders slumped, eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. For the first time in years, he looked like the boy I used to hold when nightmares came too close. You didn't have to make coffee, he murmured. Yes, I did, I said gently. We have things to talk about. He sat opposite me, fingers wrapped around the mug, staring at the rising steam. She didn't come home last night, he said finally, packed a bag and drove off. No note. She'll surface when the truth stops echoing, I replied. He nodded, then exhaled, long and shaky. Mom, I need to tell you something. Not about her, about me. I waited, silent but open, the way I'd learned to be with blueprints. Patient, allowing the lines to reveal themselves. I messed up, he said. The business, our construction firm, it's not what you think. I took on a project 2 years ago, one Troy pitched as guaranteed profit. He said we'd double our investment if we fronted cash for materials. So, I borrowed. Against the house. Against future contracts. He promised clients were lined up, but they weren't. It was a shell. He rubbed his eyes. When it fell apart, I tried to fix it. I forged invoices, recycled receipts, made the books look stable until I could pay it back. I thought if I just kept moving, I could fill the cracks. But every patch made the wall weaker. When Vivian found out, she didn't yell. She smiled, said she knew someone who could handle paperwork. And I let her. I let her lead me straight into her trap. His voice broke. I didn't just betray you. I betrayed the man you raised me to be. I reached across the table, covering his trembling hand. You didn't betray me. You lost sight of your own measure, but you found it again. That's what matters now. He looked up, eyes wet. You're not angry? I'm disappointed, I admitted, but not surprised. Good men can be misled when fear blinds them. You're not the first builder to forget his level. A faint, broken smile crossed his face. How do I fix this? By telling the truth, I said simply. Every invoice, every payment, every lie Troy convinced you to sign, bring them into the light. Charles can help. He knows how to turn confession into correction. Nathan swallowed hard. You think the law will go easy on me? The law measures actions, I said, but mercy measures courage. You've chosen the harder path. That's worth something. He leaned back, tears sliding freely now. I was so scared, Mom. Every day I woke up thinking today might be the day you'd find out. And when Vivian started pushing, saying we could shift ownership to her name, I told myself it was temporary, that I could undo it once we got ahead. But debt doesn't sleep. It eats. I listened quietly, letting him pour the guilt out, brick by brick. Shame, like mold, only grows in darkness. Once exposed, it loses its grip. After a long silence, I spoke softly. When I was building this house, there were nights I thought it would never stand. Foundations cracked, beams warped, money ran thin. But each failure taught me how to rebuild stronger. You're in that same place now. The structure isn't ruined, Nathan. It just needs honest repair. He nodded, wiping his eyes. I'll call Charles. Good, I said. He'll help you draft the statement. We'll take it to the authorities together. You'll cooperate fully. Will you come with me? Of course. You're my son. His shoulders shook once, then steadied. You should hate me. I can't, I said. You're still the boy who held the umbrella while I poured the first foundation. You lost your way, but you didn't lose your heart. He gave a fragile laugh. You always find a way to make even a confession sound like a building lesson. Architecture teaches patience, I said. Every plan begins with correction. We sat for a while longer, words fading into the soft hum of morning. Outside, the maple tree swayed, scattering sunlight across the porch. The house felt alive again, not because the past was erased, but because the truth had finally stepped inside. When the phone rang, Nathan answered. It was Charles. They spoke briefly, arranging a meeting for that afternoon. As Nathan hung up, he looked at me with quiet resolve. I'll do it right this time. I know, I said. You're already starting. Later, when he left to gather the files, I stood by the window, watching him walk down the driveway. The man who returned would not be the same one who'd stumbled. He would be rebuilt, beam by beam, with honesty as his cornerstone. In the stillness, I whispered to the walls, "He remembers how to build again." The next morning, rain tapped gently against the windows, a slow rhythm, like measured breath. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee warming my palms, while Nathan reviewed the final statement beside me. The pages trembled slightly in his hands, not from fear now, but from resolve. Charles had spent the evening shaping every word with precision. The confession was clear, complete, and honest. Nathan closed the folder and exhaled. It's all here. Every invoice, every forged signature, every transaction Troy convinced me to approve. Then it's time, I said softly. Let's hand the truth where it belongs. By 10, we met Charles at his office downtown. The rain had eased, leaving the streets clean, almost new. Detective Simon Graves was already waiting inside, tall and calm, the kind of man who carried authority without raising his voice. He greeted us with a nod, offering a seat. Charles introduced us, his tone steady. "Detective, this is Catherine Whitmore and her son, Nathan. They have information on the Bildmark fraud case." Graves opened his notebook. "Let's start from the beginning." Nathan took a deep breath. "Troy Miller, my business partner, set up shell contracts, fake supplier invoices, and double-billed clients. I signed off on them, thinking they were legitimate. When the debt piled up, he pushed me to leverage my mother's house under the pretense of refinancing. My wife, Vivian, helped facilitate it. They forged my mother's signature on preliminary deeds and planned a transfer to their names." Graves listened carefully, eyes sharp, but not unkind. "You're admitting to falsified documents and concealment of debt?" "Yes, sir," Nathan said quietly, "and I'm ready to make it right." The detective nodded. "That takes courage. We've been tracking similar patterns under Miller's companies. Your testimony, paired with these documents, will complete the chain." He flipped through the folder, pausing at the forged deed. "Your mother's signature was replicated with high accuracy. They must have used tracing software. I've seen this before. Elder fraud, financial coercion, property theft. It's becoming more common." I folded my hands on the table. "That's why we came early. They were close to finishing the transfer." Graves studied me for a moment, a flicker of admiration crossing his face. "You outmaneuvered them before they could file. That's rare. Most victims don't realize until it's too late. I built that house," I said quietly. "I knew every corner. You can't fool the architect who drew the plans." He smiled faintly. "No, ma'am, you can't." He gathered the evidence carefully. "We'll move quickly. Warrants will be issued for Miller and Mrs. Whitmore. With these signatures and email trails, prosecution will be straightforward." Nathan lowered his head. "Will I be charged too?" Graves closed the folder. "You'll face civil penalties, maybe restitution, but full. Cooperation carries weight. Your transparency today makes a difference." Charles placed a reassuring hand on Nathan's shoulder. "This is the right path. You're reclaiming your name the same way your mother reclaimed her home." Graves stood. "If you're ready, we can file the affidavit now." Nathan nodded, voice steady. "I'm ready." By noon, the paperwork was signed, stamped, and filed. The air outside smelled of rain and resolve. We walked down the courthouse steps together, a small trio bound by truth. Nathan's shoulders seemed lighter, though his eyes still carried remorse. "You did well," I told him. He managed a smile. Feels like tearing down rotten beams. It hurts, but you know you're saving the house. That's exactly what you're doing, I said. That evening, just before sunset, my doorbell rang. Evelyn stood outside, umbrella in hand, eyes wide. You might want to come see this, she said. We walked to the end of the driveway where 2 patrol cars idled under the streetlight. Blue and red lights reflected off the wet pavement, painting the night in pulses of justice. Across the street, officers escorted Troy Miller in handcuffs, his once polished shoes splashing through puddles. His eyes darted around, stunned, defiant, cornered. Behind him, a second car door opened. Vivian stepped out, wrists bound, mascara streaking in the drizzle. She spotted me immediately. "You can't do this!" she shouted, voice cracking. "You can't take my house." I stood calmly, rain dampening my hair. "You never had one," I said. She froze, eyes wide, words collapsing into silence. The officers guided her gently toward the car. Graves approached, hat tilted against the rain. "It's done," he said. "Charges include fraud, conspiracy, and attempted property theft. We'll keep you updated." "Thank you," I replied. "For seeing it through." He nodded once. "You laid a solid foundation, Mrs. Whitmore. We just followed the plans." As the cars pulled away, their lights fading down the hill, I turned to Nathan. He was watching quietly, jaw set, eyes glistening. "It's over," I whispered. He nodded. "No, Mom. It's beginning." We stood side by side, rain falling softly around us, the maple tree rustling above, a witness to every truth unearthed. That night, the house felt lighter, freer, like it was breathing again. I walked through each room slowly, the hum of justice still echoing in the air. Betrayal had tried to redraw my life. But integrity, once inked, can't be erased. The morning after the arrests, the house rested in silence, as if exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and forgiving, settling across the living room floor. I stood by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the world outside move as if nothing monumental had happened the night before. But inside, everything had changed. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a guest in my own home. No footsteps pacing above me. No voices whispering plans behind closed doors. The air carried only one sound now, the steady hum of peace. Nathan came down the stairs quietly, hair still damp from the shower, dressed in a simple gray shirt. He looked younger, lighter, though the heaviness of consequence still lingered in his eyes. "I've been on the phone all morning," he said. "Charles spoke with the prosecutor. They've agreed to a civil settlement. I'll pay restitution to the affected clients and dissolve the company." I nodded, meeting his gaze. "It's a fair trade for truth." He set a folder on the table, documents neatly clipped inside. "I'm selling my half of the equipment, transferring contracts, and closing accounts. No more shortcuts, no more shadows. Just clean ground." "You're tearing down the rot before you rebuild," I said softly. "That's how we fix what's broken." He gave a small, tired smile. "I learned that from you." We sat together at the kitchen table, the same one that had once held fraudulent papers now bearing only sincerity. Outside, a breeze stirred the maple leaves, scattering gold across the yard. I thought of all the seasons that tree had witnessed, the storms, the laughter, the losses, and how, through it all, it never stopped growing. "I'll have to find a new job," Nathan said, tracing the edge of a receipt with his thumb. "Something smaller, steadier, Maybe work under someone who can teach me what I missed chasing quick wins. You'll find it, I said. The good builders always do. And this time, you'll measure twice before you cut. He laughed quietly. You never stop being the teacher, do you? I stop when the lesson's learned. We spent the afternoon clearing out his old office. Boxes of files, tools, blueprints rolled and tied with string. Every drawer we emptied felt like releasing an old burden. When we were done, the room looked open again, like a fresh sheet of paper. As Nathan carried the last box to the car, he paused at the doorway. I didn't just lose a company, he said. I lost the illusion that I could fix everything alone. Some structures need more than one set of hands, I replied. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. He nodded slowly, eyes soft with gratitude. I'll make things right, Mom. I promise. I know you will, I said. You already started when you chose honesty. After he left for his meeting with Charles, I wandered through the house, taking in the quiet. Every room held echoes of the past. The faint scent of cedar from my drafting table, the grooves on the staircase from Nathan's sneakers years ago, the soft creak in the hallway floorboards that always announced homecoming. In the kitchen, I opened the wooden box on the mantel. Inside were the folded receipts, now joined by the new deed, a record of survival. My fingers brushed the edge of the paper, smooth and firm. So much had been risked to keep it safe. But it wasn't just a house. It was the story of every line I'd drawn, every sacrifice I'd made. I closed the lid and whispered, "We're steady again." The afternoon light shifted, spilling warmth across the floor. I brewed another cup of tea and carried it to the porch. The neighborhood was calm, neighbors waving politely as they passed, their glances now filled with quiet respect instead of gossip. Justice, it seemed, had a way of softening even the harshest eyes. A mail carrier approached, handing me an envelope. Inside was a letter from the local architectural guild, thanking me for years of service and inviting me to speak at a mentoring event for young designers. I smiled, touched by the timing. Perhaps healing didn't always come through grand gestures. Sometimes it arrived in small invitations, proof that your work still mattered. As dusk crept across the lawn, Nathan's car returned. He stepped out, holding a small box. "Something for you," he said, setting it on the porch railing. Inside lay a simple brass plaque, engraved with careful letters. Whitmore Home, built with love, integrity, and second chances. My throat tightened. "It's beautiful. I thought it belonged here," he said quietly. A reminder that even the strongest houses need repair sometimes, and that foundations, like people, can be rebuilt. I reached out and squeezed his hand. "We'll hang it together." We stood there as the sky turned amber, watching the light catch on the new plaque. The house behind us glowed, not with wealth or grandeur, but with truth reclaimed. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't ache. It soothed. It promised that peace, once earned, could be kept. The next morning carried a softness I hadn't felt in years. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, warm and golden, washing over the oak table where a lifetime of plans had been drawn, meals shared, and truths confessed. The house was quiet, but it was no longer empty. It was full of forgiveness, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken to be understood. Nathan joined me after breakfast, holding a rolled-up sheet of paper, edges yellowed with age. "I found this in your old drafting cabinet," he said, setting it gently on the table. "Recognize it?" The sight of that familiar parchment tugged at something deep inside me. I unrolled it carefully. Across its surface stretched pencil lines, neat and deliberate, annotated with tiny notes in faded ink. Kitchen wall load-bearing, reinforced beam, add window for morning light, and in the lower corner, a signature, K. Whitmore, architect. "It's the first drawing of this house," I whispered. "The one we made when your father and I bought the land." He nodded. "You kept every version, every edit." "Every wall started here," I said, softly. "Before the bricks, before the paint. It was all vision first." Nathan's eyes glistened. "I used to sit beside you while you sketched. You'd hand me a pencil and tell me to draw what I wanted in my room. I remember thinking those lines were magic." "They were," I smiled. "They turned dreams into something we could touch." He leaned back, taking a deep breath. "Mom, I built so many walls trying to prove myself. At work, at home, even between us. I thought strength meant standing alone. But now I see. You built this house with love, not walls. I'm sorry it took me this long to understand." Tears welled in my eyes. I reached for his hand. "You built walls, son. I built a home. And homes can always be restored." For a long moment, we sat in silence. The blueprint spread between us like a bridge spanning years of misunderstanding. It was more than paper now. It was proof of vision, endurance, and grace. Nathan wiped his eyes and smiled. "I want to plant something today, a new beginning, right here in this yard." I tilted my head. "What did you have in mind?" He opened a small box he'd brought from the car. Inside lay a young maple tree, its roots wrapped in burlap, tiny green leaves trembling in the morning light. "A maple," I said softly, "just like the one your father planted when you were born." He nodded. "That tree grew with me. Its branches stretched higher every year. I thought maybe it's time for another one." We stepped outside together, the earth still damp from last night's rain. The air smelled of renewal. Nathan carried the sapling while I brought a trowel and a small wooden stake. We walked to the edge of the yard, near the spot where the original maple once stood tall before a storm took it down years ago. "This feels right," he said. "It is," I replied. "Roots only grow strong in honest soil." We dug side by side, our movements unhurried, each shovel of earth a quiet prayer. When the hole was ready, Nathan lowered the sapling gently into place. Together, we packed the soil around its base, pressing it firm, anchoring new life where loss once lingered. He tied the stake, straightened the trunk, and stepped back. "There," he said softly. "It'll stand tall one day." "It already does," I said. We stood together in silence, watching sunlight glint off its tender leaves. The breeze stirred them, whispering through the branches like words of blessing. Nathan turned to me, voice low but certain. "I want to do something good, Mom, something lasting. You rebuilt your life with strength and grace. I want to build something that gives back, too." "You will," I said. "And I think I know where to start." He looked curious. "What do you mean?" I led him inside and retrieved a folder from the cabinet. Inside were notes I'd been drafting quietly in the evenings, a vision that had taken root long before justice arrived. I placed it on the table before him. "The Whitmore Foundation," I said, "for single mothers studying architecture, to help women like me who built without applause, who drew plans between bedtime stories and unpaid bills." Nathan blinked, emotion flooding his face. "You've already thought of everything." "I had help," I smiled. "Charles reviewed the legal structure. Evelyn agreed to serve as honorary trustee. We'll fund it with part of the settlement and what's left of my retirement. It's time to turn survival into legacy. He pressed his hand over mine. You're giving back the way you built, brick by brick. That's the only way it lasts, I said. We can't keep every wall we build, but we can leave the blueprints behind. Later that afternoon, Charles and Evelyn stopped by. We gathered on the porch, watching the young maple sway in the wind. Evelyn handed me a framed copy of the deed, newly notarized and embossed. Thought you'd want the final version for your records, she said. I smiled, running a hand over the seal. Proof that justice can be drawn clean. Charles raised his glass of iced tea. To new roots, strong beams, and better plans. We clinked glasses, the sound light and bright, echoing through the yard. As evening settled, Nathan brought out the brass plaque he'd made, the one that read, "Built with love, integrity, and second chances." He knelt beside the sapling and pressed it gently into the soil. The metal caught the fading sunlight, gleaming like a promise. We stood together beneath the glow of the setting sun, the air warm, the horizon soft. Behind us, the house stood proud once more, not a monument to possession, but to perseverance. Somewhere deep within the earth, new roots stretched quietly into the soil. And for the first time in a long while, I felt mine do the same. The day began in golden silence. The air outside carried that faint autumn crispness, the kind that makes you breathe deeper, slower, thankful. I stood on the porch with my morning tea, watching the young maple's leaves tremble in the light. Its roots were still finding their way, just like ours, but it was standing tall, strong, ready. Inside, the house glowed with warmth again, not the forced brightness of pretense, but the quiet radiance of peace. Every room carried its own memory, laughter, sorrow, lessons learned. Each wall bore witness to the storms that had passed and the strength that remained. Nathan arrived just after noon, carrying a loaf of sourdough from the bakery down the street, the same one we used to visit when he was a boy. "I thought we could share lunch," he said, holding up the paper bag. "I even remembered your favorite, fig jam." I smiled. "You're learning." We sat at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring across the wood, breaking bread the way families do when words fall short. Between bites, Nathan told me about a new job offer, a small construction firm that specialized in restoring historic homes. "They want someone with hands-on experience," he said. "Someone who understands structure." "Sounds like they've found the right man," I replied. He grinned softly. "I told them I learned from the best." For a while, we ate in contented quiet, the kind that comes only after storms have passed. Then Nathan's expression turned serious. "The court hearing's set for next week," he said. "Troy and Vivian both accepted plea deals. Fraud, forgery, restitution. They'll be sentenced soon." I nodded. Justice works best when truth walks beside it. He looked down, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "I'll be there. I owe it to the people we hurt. To watch it through, not turn away." "That's how you start rebuilding trust," I said. "Brick by brick, choice by choice." He looked up, eyes steady. "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me." I reached across the table, resting my hand over his. "You just needed to find your footing again. Every builder stumbles once. What matters is that you picked up the tools instead of the excuses." His voice caught. "You gave me a second life." "No," I whispered, smiling gently. "You built it yourself. I just handed you the blueprint." Outside, the afternoon sun began to dip, painting gold across the walls I once thought I might lose. Through the window, I saw Detective Graves pull up to the curb. He stepped out, tipping his hat before walking toward the porch. I opened the door before he knocked. "Detective." "Mrs. Whitmore," he greeted with that steady calm of his. "Just wanted to update you. The district attorney's pleased with your cooperation. Between your documentation and your son's statement, the case is airtight. Troy's assets are frozen. Vivian's facing restitution and probation. No more shadows to hide in." I nodded, relief soft but sure. "It's good to hear." He smiled faintly. "Not often I see justice served this cleanly. You didn't just win, ma'am. You taught them something." "Maybe," I said. But mostly, I reminded them, you can't redraw a life that isn't yours. Graves tipped his hat again. "Enjoy your evening. You've earned it." As he left, Nathan joined me on the porch, watching the cruiser roll down the hill. "You think they'll ever understand what they did?" he asked quietly. "Understanding isn't always the gift we're given," I said, "but consequence is." We stood together for a while, the horizon melting into shades of rose and amber. The young maple swayed in the wind, its leaves catching the light like tiny flames. Somewhere down the street, a wind chime sang softly, its notes drifting toward us, gentle and clear. Nathan glanced at me. "You ever think about selling? Starting fresh somewhere else?" I shook my head. "No, this house is more than timber and nails. It's where I learned that silence isn't surrender, and kindness isn't weakness. You don't abandon a lesson once you've built it into your bones." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll come by next week. Help repaint the porch. Maybe fix the railing on the stairs." "I'd like that," I said. We sat together on the steps, watching the sun slip lower, the sky deepening into copper and violet. For a long while, neither of us spoke. There was no need. The air was full of everything we'd already said. The apologies, the promises, the quiet forgiveness. I looked at the tree, its shadow stretching long across the yard. Somewhere beneath the soil, its roots were anchoring, weaving strength from earth and time. I thought of all the walls I'd drawn, all the foundations I'd poured, and realized the most important ones were invisible. The lines of love, patience, and dignity that hold a family upright when everything else falls apart. Nathan broke the silence first. "You know, I used to think owning a house meant success, but now, I think it's something else." "What's that?" I asked. He smiled softly. "It's knowing you belong somewhere, and making sure the people you love do too." I nodded, eyes misting as the sun slipped behind the hills. "That's the truth, son. And truth. That's something no one can ever steal." He stood, stretching, then helped me up from the step. Together, we turned toward the front door, the porch light flickering on just as the first stars began to shine. As I stepped inside, I took one last glance at the horizon glowing beyond the walls I'd designed. My voice was barely a whisper, carried off by the wind. The sweetest revenge isn't owning a house. It's owning your life, wall by wall. And with that, I closed the door gently, the latch clicking like a heartbeat. Steady, certain, home.